I am Brett of brett.maytom.net. In this level 200 screencast, we will create a Hello World C# application. The objective. When learning a new programming language, it's nice to take a first look at the language and gauge the language syntax. It has become a bit of a tradition to write the simplest code possible to display the world's Hello World. We're going to create that application, then compile it and execute it. I'll also show you what happens if the compiler cannot compile your code. To add a different mix to the demonstration, I'll do it in Notepad with the command line compiler. This will basically prove you do not need the Visual Studio IDE. However, in the real world, it is a great productivity tool. Let's jump into the deep end and write Hello World, compile, run, and deal with compile errors. The first thing I'm going to do is take the Visual Studio command prompt and pin it to the start menu. This is used quite often and frequent, so I'd like easy access to it. Start menu, all programs, Visual Studio 2010, Visual Studio Tools, and you'll see the Visual Studio command prompt. Right click on it and pin to start menu. If I go to my start menu now, there's my command prompt. I'm going to launch it. For this demonstration, my code is in a different directory, so I'm going to move to that directory, D drive. I'm now going to make a folder for this demo. It's lesson 4, module 2, Hello World. Let's launch up Notepad with our first file. C# files are created with the .cs extension. So I'm going to create a C# file called Hello World. Notepad Hello World.cs. The first thing that's not created, so do I want to create the new file? Yes. Let's start writing some code. C# is object-oriented. Everything is in a class, so the first thing that we need to do is declare a class. The class has a name, and my class is going to be called Hello World Program. The class then has code, and when we write code, we put those into curly braces, as I've highlighted. Inside the Hello World class, we now create properties and methods. I'm now going to create a method as the entry point to the program. So the first thing I need to do is create a signature, which is a well-known signature for a program to start. Static void main, and that's the basic signature of a method. Now what this is meaning, I have a method called main. This is a well-known, well-defined and well-described method for the start of an application. It's called the main method. This method takes arguments or parameters. In this particular case, it's open braces, close braces, and I do not have any parameters. It's a void method, which means when this method finishes execution, it's not going to return anything. Static is a bit of a complex topic to describe, and I will describe this in a future session. However, to give a quick explanation, static is used on items such as methods or properties that can be accessed without creating an object instance of a class. Don't stress too much, we'll cover that in detail in the future. There's the basic signature of my method. The next is to actually put code into the method. Again, we put curly braces. Please note that the static method and its code is nested inside of the class. So this method belongs. Now we need to write code to display the Hello World. Part of the .NET framework, there's a class library that allows us to interact with the console. To gain access to the .NET Framework class libraries, we use the system namespace. So I'm going to go into system and access the console class. The console class has a method called writeLine. That writeLine method takes a parameter of some text, and I'm going to write hello world out. All C# statements end with a semicolon. This is the basic to create a C# application. Some other bits of information. C# syntax is case sensitive, so reserved words such as class, static, void have to be in lowercase. Most of the reserved words are in lowercase. The system namespace is used to gain access to the .NET Framework. Let's save this file and then compile it. So jumping to the command line, when you've installed C# and the .NET Framework, you'll get access to the C# compiler. The file is actually csc.exe. However, you do not need to type in the .exe. The next is a parameter, and this is the name of the file you want to compile, hello world.cs. When I compile it, the compiler runs and does the compilation. Let's look at the result. You'll notice that there's a hello world.exe file that has been created. To run that exe file, very simple. Hello world. You don't have to put in the exe, you just can type hello world. And there is our results of writing hello world. Just to change the code, what we can go through and type in hello Brett. I'll save that. And let's compile it again and run it. You'll notice it now says hello Brett. Let's now look at some other parts. The CSC command has a help set of switches which you can go through and type /?. I'm going to scroll up and let's look at the command line syntax. You can go through and specify the name of the out file. You can change the target to an exe or a library. You can go through and sign it with a strong key file. You can go through and add references to other framework components. You can specify multiple file names if you want to, so it allows you to put in several other file names. There's a whole lot of other switches. Don't stress too much about all these command line switches, as we won't really be using them. We'll rather be using Visual Studio, which handles the compilation. The next I want to show is dealing with exceptions. Earlier on I mentioned that C# is a case-sensitive language. So what I'm going to go through and do is I'm going to change the class to all capital letters and save it. Let's compile it. On compilation, you'll notice it comes up with an error. It actually comes up with 3 errors. It tells you an error and an error number, and then it says a namespace cannot directly contain members such as fields or methods. It's also indicating that it's expecting a class delegate enum or struct, and that's giving us a clue. Normally you would have to read a couple of the errors to get a clue of what's going on. In our case, it's expecting a class. So we can go through and change that to class and save that. Let's do another exception. Console has a method called writeLine. I'm going to change that and make a spelling mistake and call it writeLin. Save that and compile it. This time I'm not going to get an exception saying system console does not contain the definition for writeLin. If we inspect the code, we can change that code, save it, recompile, everything's successful, and then run the application. In review, C# applications are made of classes. A class can have methods and properties. The code of a class is nested within curly braces, and the code within a method is nested in curly braces. C# files have a .cs extension. CSC is the command line compiler for C#. You do not need Visual Studio to compile C# applications. However, in the real world, it's an extremely useful and productive environment to build your code in.